Hi there, I'm Amy HR, and welcome to the Don't Talk to HR podcast. I thought I would start off our last episode of the season with a little bit of levity. So, in HR, one of the appeals of the profession to many of us is some of the what we call employee relations cases that we get to deal with. So the crazy stories, and believe me, we have many. So I thought I would share one with you that did not happen to me, but it did happen to a colleague of mine. And I thought it was an interesting case. I happened to be in the room hearing about this at the time that it happened. So for HR people, our annual Super Bowl is the sales kickoff or sales conferences that you have usually in every organization once a year, where all the salespeople get together and they get rallied up for the year. And oftentimes it involves a copious amount of alcohol. So we always get a lot of cases coming out of sales kickoff, and we sort of sit by the phone and just wait because we know that something's coming. So in one particular case, we had a gentleman who happened to be a very high ranking C-level executive who was well known for not being inappropriate per se historically, but he enjoyed his libations, and he went to the sales kickoff and was in the bar, had a few too many drinks, and the next thing you know, he was and this was back in the late 90s, so I don't know if this is still a thing, but he was doing a body shot off of a female sales representative at the bar, on the bar, in front of the entire sales team. Then he got up and stumbled out of the room and went to go into his hotel room, and he couldn't figure out the card key. So he just fell asleep on the doorstep. And later on, the CFO came by and had to carry him into his room. Now, I did not personally experience this. Like I said, it was a colleague of mine who had to deal with the situation, but I thought that one was rather interesting. This was a long time ago. The gentleman in question is a great guy, just did not make very good choices in the moment. And to be fair, back in the day, with the alcohol culture was very prevalent in the Silicon Valley at the time. This is a good idea of something not to do, especially if you're a C-suite level executive. Don't get drunk in front of your colleagues and do inappropriate things. So just wanted to bring some levity. I got a million of these stories, and next season we are going to start kicking off some of these stories to tell you how they should have been handled. Okay, so we are going to be looking at some questions that have come in this season from those of you who were kind enough to watch our podcast. So, first question is, what's the moment you knew you couldn't keep protecting the company at the employee's expense? Oh, goodness, this is really tricky, and there's a really big one, but I don't. It's big enough that I don't want to tell you that one because it could be traced back, and I really don't want to expose the company. But there have been several. One that I am thinking of is a vice president that I supported many years ago, and they had a admin that worked for them that was eccentric but hardworking and hadn't done anything in particularly that would call for them to be fired, but it's the vice president. And in some of the conversations, and this was when I was earlier in my career, so I really didn't have that much experience with these types of cases, but they wanted to fire the admin because A, they were pregnant, and B, they wanted to hire a friend of theirs that they had worked with previously. And so they started making things up like, oh, I think that she's on meth, and I think that she's doing all of these crazy things. And I'm like, that's okay. A, you can't fire a pregnant woman, right? That is very much frowned upon. And B, you can't manufacture evidence against somebody and say that they're on meth when you have absolutely no evidence to that contrary. I was nervous because it was the first time that I would have to coach an executive who was significantly above me in rank on telling them, no, you can't do that. And that one was really, really tricky. But I did have the conversation. I said, you can't do that. You cannot fire a pregnant employee, first of all. If you want to hire this individual, we're just going to have to, wait and look at other options and that type of thing. But we are not going to do that in this case. And so the vice president backed down. We moved on, and the pregnant employee continued and was there for several years. And actually, the vice president ended up being quite happy with their performance. But there's been many stories like this where on the company side, they might be in a situation where they want to go in a certain direction and there's something blocking them, and then they're trying to get creative with it. And one of our big jobs is to stop them and say, these are the risks associated with that decision, and this is why you shouldn't do that. So yeah, there you go. All right, what else you got? Oh gosh. Okay. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing on your first day as a chief people officer, what would it be? Well, the first day that I stepped into a chief people officer role, I had gone from senior director to executive vice president overnight, right? I went from a 13,000 person company to a 2,500 person company. So it was a significantly larger position, but for a smaller organization. But I skipped a few levels. And so when I walked in, I was not prepared to change my conversations from let's talk about HR all day long to we're going to be talking about the company's financials all day long. And I did not speak the language. So if I could go back and tell myself one thing, it would be get on the YouTube and do some research about company financials and what do you need to know? How does it affect your job? I still use ChatGPT and Claude all the time now. Just remind me what this ratio is, help me. How does this fit into my world? But yeah, nobody told me that I was going to need to have a depth of understanding in the financials. So that's what I would have said. And I also would have gone back and told myself, go get the MBA instead of the master's in HR and OD, because it will probably serve you a lot better. As an HR professional, once you get to this level, you are truly a business professional. You have to not only speak the language of finance, but you need to understand your impact on those numbers, and you need to be able to converse with your colleagues about their financial position, what they're contributing. I'm not the CFO, but I do have to make sure that I'm showing fiduciary responsibility. So that's what I would tell myself. Oh, goodness. Okay. What's a policy you enforce that you no longer believe in? Everybody needs to be in the office 5 days a week. So I have never really bought into this policy. Once we were able to begin working from home, working remote, when laptops became more common. When I first got into the profession, we all had desktops. Nobody had a laptop. And if you did, it weighed like 1,000 pounds. When we started having laptops in the workplace and then home internet, and it became easy to work from home, I actually found that sometimes it was easier for me to focus and concentrate when I was working from home, because when you're in the office, especially in HR, you have people coming in and out constantly and interrupting your flow throughout the day. So I really like the work from home policy. I joined Yahoo right after Marissa Mayer joined, and she had shut down the work from home policy. And she did it for very good reasons, because a large population was working from home. She wasn't seeing the innovation that she was looking for, and she wanted to bring people back into the office to drive collaboration and innovation. And she did a lot of good things to bring everyone back in. She had free food. We had all these parties. It was really great, and it did work. And the reality was, I worked from home all the time. It was common practice, because we just needed to come back in and reestablish that connection. And then if you had the cable guy coming, you could work from home. Later on in my career, when I was a CPO at a large multinational company, I remember talking with the CFO, who was a good friend of mine, about remote work. And he was convinced that, you couldn't have remote work, that you needed to have your staff there so that you could interact with them and, oversee what they were doing. And I was like, dude, all you need to do is, you set the guidelines, you set the boundaries, you let them know what you expect, and then you just continue to monitor performance like you would in any other case. So we had like a little friendly debate about this. And then guess what? COVID hit. And we were able to show that remote work is absolutely possible. As a matter of fact, many people are more productive in this particular environment. It doesn't come without its downsides, of course. One thing we learned very early in the pandemic was you lose the connection, right? We had situations, for example, where you might have a new team coming together in the pandemic. They've never met each other in person. And so it's harder to gel in that case, and build the relationship so that you can be effective as a team. So in those cases, it's, let's everybody mask up, let's get together, let's have lunch outside, just so you can get to know each other as human beings. There's something about being with somebody in person and sitting with them that really does make a difference when it comes to things like team building. So We had to get creative in the pandemic. But to this day, I believe that we're all adults. And as if your job allows you to work remotely, if you have a really good, effective manager that's clear with their direction and their expectations, there's no reason why you can't have a remote policy. But if you have cultural challenges or you have some real things you're trying to tackle, that is a time when it makes more sense to bring people back in. So I am not a fan of the everybody must come into the office policy. Oh, okay. What's a red flag in a workplace that most people miss until it's too late? Oh, goodness. In the companion book, the CPO Toolbox, I actually have a list of questions for HR people to ask in the interview process, because you need to remember that not only is the company interviewing you, but you are interviewing them. And one of the things that is very disruptive if you don't get a good understanding of it in advance is how are decisions made? Because there are certain organizations that I've worked for with lovely, lovely people and very successful companies that they make decisions behind closed doors and you have no input. And it's just, okay, we'll come out with an answer and let you know. And then you just go. And I know for me, that doesn't work. I want to be able to give my feedback and have input on certain key decisions. And I don't like to be stuck over here waiting for days or weeks or months, because I come from the Silicon Valley, especially in the software space, where decisions happen really, really fast. We work with an agile mindset. So that drives me insane. The slow decision-making process and keeping key people out of the feedback loop, that is something that drives me really crazy. And it's something that you should inquire about when you're interviewing. So how are decisions made around here? Are they made by committee? Are they made by one individual on the executive team and just flow down, right? These are things you really want to look into, because this could kill your motivation quite quickly. If you were advising your younger self walking into her first HR role, what's the one boundary you'd tell her to set immediately? Well, this is a very different question, or a very different thing that I would say to my younger self than my current self. So, my younger self, when I was in my 20s, I was fresh out of college. I was a party girl, I like to go out and I like to, go to the clubs and dance and drink and, and hang out with all my colleagues. And back in the day, we had a lot of fun. It was a really, really fun time in the Silicon Valley where we were all just coming out of college. We were learning together. We were really building out this broader Silicon Valley culture. And it was so much fun to be part of that. But I would say you're in HR and that's not appropriate. So maybe don't go party with your colleagues. Maybe go party with other people that you meet somewhere else. Although we had a wonderful time. What's a question employees should be asking in exit interviews that they never do? Oh, wow, that's a good one. I think I would want to ask, what are you intending to do with this feedback? That would be the first question I would ask is your intention just to gather it and stick it in a file and never look at it again, just so you could say, oh, this person left because of compensation or whatever? I'd want to know, are you actually going to take some action with this feedback? Otherwise, what's the point? You know, I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else. I got a better title, a better pay package, whatever the case may be. We do ask a lot of questions in exit interviews because we are ultimately, the reason we do this is because we want to understand what we could do better as an organization. But many, many companies just take the information and file it away. I'm one of those people where I want to know, like, I want not just the main reason, oh, the person left for a better compensation package or they left because they're a manager. I want to know the first and second reason, what really was driving the issue. That's why we go deep on these exit interviews, because I want to know, do I have any leaders in particular I need to look into? Like, is there somebody that's building a reputation for being toxic or dismissive of women or whatever the case may be? We're looking for that. And sometimes it doesn't come out until the exit interview. But I would definitely ask, what is your intention with the material? What was the exact conversation or experience that changed how you saw your own job? Oh, goodness. This is a good question. So there's two experiences. So one was the pandemic. That was a big one. And I'm a people pleaser. I'm in this profession because I love to help people. I want to help them grow and develop their careers. And that's really very much, I had sort of an optimistic, idealistic view of my role. The conversation, or the experience, I should say, that I had that changed that initially was when the pandemic kicked in, because it was holy smokes new experience. We didn't know how to proceed. We were kind of making it all up as we went along. And so I realized that part of the role is really that crisis management, is keeping everybody else calm when it's a situation where they could be quite upset or distraught. You got to go in there and be there for the people. So I did recognize that, yes, I need to be there for the people in this instance. Like, don't you push your own feelings aside, because you need to be there for them. And then we actually had the war in Ukraine that I've talked about previously break out a little bit later. And it was the same thing. This isn't about your reaction to this. You need to be there for those people. And I've used that during layoffs. Having those conversations is really tough for the people that have to notify employees. But again, it's not about you, it's about the employee. Now, the second experience that changed how I saw my own job was when I burnt out, because I saw my role as I need to be there for everybody. I need to be on 24 hours a day. I need to serve the board and the CEO, and I also need to serve the employees, and I've got to be on for everybody all the time. And that didn't work so well. I ultimately did have a burnout, and I needed to take a break. And since then, what I have recognized and understood, that I am just as important in this equation as everybody else. And I need to, yes, my job entails helping others and putting focus on them, but I also need my own downtime. So now I've set boundaries and built balance around myself, because I know I can't be effective to anyone else if I'm not taking care of myself. So that's a big one. What's something in your personal life outside of work that shapes how you show up in every room you walk into? Oh my goodness. How I show up in every room. Well, you know what? I think having children really changed a lot. I mean, I think every parent can say that. Once you have kids, it changes your view of the world. It's kind of like somebody reached into your chest, pulled out your heart, gave it legs, and it's walking around outside your body. You live in a constant state of worry and fear and self-degrading talk of, oh, I'm not a good enough parent, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. But you also have this little person that just loves you more than anybody else in the world, and it's wonderful. But my children have really crafted a lot of how I show up, because I when I'm working with my team, I take on a very sort of motherly approach, not like mama bear, that type of thing, but it's very important to me that I get to know my team on a personal level, that I understand if there's anything going on in their life, not to be intrusive, of course, but just like, hey, what's going on with you? How can I support you? Because I'm looking for the signs of burnout. I'm looking for angst. I'm looking for confusion. I'm looking to see what is it that I can do to help make this person's life easier. And how can I build trust with them so that they will talk to me about these things? And it's been a real game changer. The first time I took on this thinking, I actually had an employee that was working for me that was normally an absolute rock star. And all of a sudden, I started to see her performance slip. And it was very unusual for her. So I thought about my daughter, and I said, I'm looking at her and I'm seeing something, but I didn't want to intrude. And at the same time, I said, if this was my kid, I would say something, right? I would say, are you okay? Is something going on? Can I help? And so that's what I did. I talked to the colleague, and she ended up telling me that she was going through a very rough personal time and that it was very distracting. And I was like, okay, so now we know what the issue is. Now we can come up with a solution, because I know that this performance is not your norm at all. So I gave her some time off so she could deal with the issue, and she came back roaring later on. But I think that that's something, you don't want to be overly motherly with your staff. Of course, you've got to have some boundaries there, because this is still work. But it really is important that you build trust with your employees and that you take the time to get to know them, because that makes it a lot easier when things go wonky and you can try and understand what's going on and have a constructive conversation. Oh, what's the biggest misconception people have about you before they get to know you? Um, that's a really good question. I think so. So one of them is, I have a couple of big companies in my background, and I've had people be like, "Oh, you're just a big company person. You can't do smaller company." But the fact of the matter is, I've worked companies as small as 11 people all the way up to almost 100,000. And I prefer the smaller companies, to be honest with you. It took me a long time to figure that out, but I find that I do my best work at a smaller organization because I like to go into the weeds. I'm not 100% comfortable just being at the strategic level all the time. I want to get into it. I want to help. I want to be participating with the team. And I love to build on new programs, new projects, and really take it to the next level. So, and it's harder to do that in a very large organization. But if you just look at my resume and you just see me walking in the door, that would be a very big misconception you might have. Another big misconception people have about me is I think I show up looking and acting professional. But you wouldn't know that I do have a tattoo or two here and there, and that I like heavy metal. So that's a new thing. My daughter took me to the Aftershock Festival last year to see Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, Korn, all these different bands, and now I'm hooked, and I'm listening to heavy metal, rocking out with my dog in the car a lot. Let's see. What conversation are you avoiding having on this podcast that you know you eventually will? I think I might have talked a little bit about the dragon sword story previously. One of the things that is a common theme, I think, not just in my own career, but in many people's, is the concept of failure, right? We've all had failures or we've all made mistakes in our career and had things happen. I personally, my favorite interview question, anybody I interview, I always ask them, can you tell me about a failure you've experienced? Because it's not the failure, right? Everybody fails, everybody makes mistakes. It's how you respond to it that matters, right? So, just to tell you the Dragon Sword story briefly, when I was building out shared services many, many years ago for a particular company, it was my first time doing it, and I was, scrambling, and we went and we had a very, very tight deadline and we got it up and running, but there were a lot of things going on behind the scenes that were really disruptive. And so I was working 16 to 18 hours a day, every day, and just, I was exhausted and I was hit with so much negative feedback. I was fatigued and I was feeling like a complete and utter failure. As a matter of fact, somebody even told me to my face that there was talk of this being a failure. And that killed me because I had never really failed big before. And I had worked so hard and everything was on time, on schedule, on budget, all of that. I couldn't understand quite went wrong. I remember sitting on the deck with my husband and I said, I think I should just quit. I'm over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. I should just quit before they fire me. And this boy laughed at me and he said, come on, babe, you're a dragon slayer. Go grab your sword and charge into battle. Right. And a couple of days later, FedEx showed up at my door with an actual dragon sword. So I have a collection of swords that my husband has bought me over the years anytime I start to show some self doubt. So I have a samurai sword, I have a lightsaber, I have throwing stars. I got a whole collection. But point of this story is I realized, you know what? He's right. I am a dragon slayer. So I went back in. It took me a few months, but I was able to stabilize things and get it back on track. And the last I heard, the service is still alive and well at that organization. But what I learned from that is I had failed to really do initial stakeholder analysis. I had failed to bring the team along with me. I was just like, okay, this is what I'm doing, go, right? But it's so important to do that initial stakeholder analysis and make sure that you've got your team coming along. But I could list out 1,000 other failures of, oh, I didn't realize that I was burning out, right? Is that a failure? Is it not? We just talked about it. It's really not a failure. It's something that happens and something you learn from. And I won't make that mistake again, right? And I won't make the stakeholder mistake again either. So I guess that's the only thing I would say I haven't really been avoiding talking about, but that would be the one. If you had to defend HR for one thing, just one, what would it be? I would say we try a lot harder for the employees than you probably realize. When we did the research for the book, we heard very loud and clear that a lot of people feel that HR is not there for them, that we are only there to protect the company. I absolutely understand where that perception comes from. And quite frankly, if I was just an employee, I might have the same impression. But this is why I try so hard to reach out to employees and spend time with them so that I can build trust with them and they can see, yeah, I'm here for the company, of course, but I am also here for you. And sometimes I find myself at odds. I find myself stuck between what the company wants or needs to do and what I feel is right for the employees. And that is a very tough, tough battle. you find your own moral fiber being questioned at times in those circumstances. And I really wish that people knew just how hard we really do work for employees and try and make their lives easier. But if you sign up to join HR, it's kind of like you sign up to be a celebrity. You're gonna have haters. You're gonna have stalkers. You're gonna have those kind of things. You sign up for HR. You sign up for a lot of people really not liking you. That's got to be okay. What's a crazy thing that happened to you in your career? Okay, so this is a fun story. Back in my early career, and I think it's still online somewhere, when I was at Ink to Me, my first job, we were all young and silly, and we had this culture of every Friday night we would get into these water fights. It just started as a way to blow off steam in the early days, and I was working, and all of a sudden the engineers came up and started blasting me with water guns. It was like, what's going on? It turned into this huge fight, and it just started happening every Friday. We would have our beer bash, and then somebody would attack you with water balloons or water guns in the office, and it became this huge part of the culture. And it was kind of like the engineers versus everybody else. So those of us that were on the more administration side of things, we would get our water balloons ready every Friday morning. We'd have everything ready to go. We even came with gear. It was a whole thing. This went on for years. And then there was one weekend when it was a Friday, and the engineers had gone to an offsite. While they were gone, I grabbed my crew, and we went around the engineers' cube areas, and we just destroyed it. We put like paper shreddings in their cubes. We put shrink wrap on their keyboards. We did all kinds. We just destroyed their area. I had a great time. Somebody calls me and said, "You've got a mole. They let the engineers know what you're doing, and they're on their way back right now." So I said, "Oh no." I ran and I left. I went home for the day. And then over the weekend, I get a phone call from a colleague of mine, and she's laughing, and she said, "Whatever you do, do not wear a skirt to the office tomorrow. They got you." And I come in the next morning, and the engineers had spent the entire weekend coming in, and they built a real brick house around my cubicle. Like, it had a window, it had a flower box, it had running water, a door, a doorbell, a mailbox, and a white picket fence with grass. It was fabulous. So that was the brick house of Ink to Me that was built around my cubicle back in, I don't even know when it was, but it was a long, long time ago. So if you look up Ink to Me brick house, yeah, that was my cubicle. Why I couldn't wear a skirt was because the door to the house was on the ground, so I would have had to crawl to get in. And but the funny thing about this brick house is it had running water. So one of the general managers would come over and fill up, like, from the little water spigot. It was a real water spigot that you would see on the side of a house. He would fill up his cup for his tea from my water. And there was a doorbell, and people would ring the doorbell. It was really annoying. Eventually, the CFO carved out a little passageway for me, so I didn't need to crawl in. But anytime there was a customer visit, they always had to come up and see the brick house. So my life was kind of a constant interruption for about 3 months before we moved out of that facility. Buggy, come get a treat. We want you on camera. I'd like to introduce you to my friend. This is Tater Tot. You've probably seen her on some of the other breakouts. She is sorry she has to go look for a treat now. Okay, so thank you so much for hanging in with us for this season. It was a lot of fun. Some of the conversations were uncomfortable, maybe, to hear, because we are being very critical of the HR profession. But I think that if you are truly going to defend an argument or a profession, you need to look at it from all angles, right? You need to understand the good, the bad, the ugly, what the perception is, and then we can really start to take strides to making the profession even more effective and impactful to both the organization and the employees. And I do think that we can accomplish both. I think there's some minor adjustments that we need to make in terms of how we respond to both employees and the organization, but also maybe in terms of our overall organizational structure. There are some things that we need to consider. Of course, it's a very different undertaking if you're at a smaller organization versus a larger organization where you have some more opportunities to make some impactful change. But I just want to say thank you if you are an executive in HR or just an executive that is thinking about HR and how it can be more impactful for your organization. I hope you got some things out of this. If you're an employee and you're not feeling seen at work, or you think HR is out to get you, I can't say that they're not always out to get you. I can say I'm not. I actually am here to hopefully make your lives easier and help you get rid of the things that are blocking your own progress so that you can proceed and you can find fulfillment in your own career. Most of the people that I know in HR have that same mentality. We really want to see our employees happy and thriving. We're not always going to be able to make you happy. It's kind of like being a mom. You want your kids to have everything, but sometimes you have to say no, you cannot have, a bag of Snickers for dinner. But these are things that we do grapple with, and we're doing our best to try and help you. But I hope you know that in most cases, you can talk to HR. You should talk to HR. So do talk to HR. So we are wrapping up this season right now, but we will be back working on our content for next season. I'm getting a lot of requests to tell the crazy HR stories, so maybe we will start pulling in some of those. But please subscribe, tell your friends, do all the things, because we're going to be bringing you more content. And I think I want to bring some more fun to this podcast. So thank you for your suggestions, questions, and support. Have a great summer.